Alright everyone, so if you followed us so far in part 1 and 2 of this tutorial, this is part 3, and basically what I want to do is cover the model view controller architecture in .NET at a very high level. Again, I'm not trying to get too advanced for anybody out there, because some of you that are watching this might be trying to transition from other technologies. You probably never even heard of MVC or worked with it in the past, but essentially what MVC is, model view controller. The model represents data architecture essentially, and that I don't want to use that too loosely, but essentially it's like an object with properties in it. So to talk about the model, basically what I want to do here is I'm going to add a new model. So I'll go to add in the models folder, class, and let me think of something good here. Let's call this customer models. And it's a good idea to always put whatever type it is after. This is a model, so, or what convention, so I'm going to do customer models.cs. I'm going to hit add. So here we are. We have an empty model, which is essentially an object that contains any properties associated. And you know, the best the best example or analogy I can give is if you have a car, you have different models of vehicles, and within those models they have certain properties. You know, whether it's like a turbo engine or specific trim package, stuff like that. And this is essentially how this works. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to go in here and I'm going to set some variables, and I don't want to get too deep into C#. There's great books out there if you need to learn a little C#. I think even W3 Schools has some content. I'm not an advanced C# developer. I know enough to be dangerous, but that's about it. But again, there are other references. I'm just gonna cover everything I need to get an app up and running, connect to some data, and spit it out on the page, edit it, all that good stuff. So to start out, I want to think of my model data as typically what I would put inside of a SQL database. So the first thing I would start out with is public int ID get set. Every property has to have a getter and a setter, and this is the way it's done in .NET C#. The next thing that I'm going to do is I know that ID is going to be the key inside the database. So I want to add what's called a data annotation, and I'm going to write the word key in here. Now what's going to happen is Visual Studio is going to say, wait a minute, this type or namespace could not be found. You're probably missing an assembly reference. This is where all these references come in handy here. And Visual Studio is pretty good about helping you resolve those. So if I right click on there, sure enough, resolve using system.componentModel.data annotations, and that will turn teal color, and we're good to go there. And again, that's basically saying the ID is going to be the key in the data set in SQL or whatever database you're using. So the next thing I'm going to do, public string first name, and we're going to proper case everything like this, and we're going to do get set. And then what I'm going to do to make life a little easier here is copy this just a bunch of times, and we're going to go last name, phone, email, let's do address 2, city, we'll do state, and we'll do zip. Now the big thing here is I've got everything set as a string, and again, don't want to get too advanced. We could get into data types, and I'm sure people will comment like, well, why is everything a string? Technically this should be a decimal, or not decimal, but a integer, and so forth and so on. I don't even care at this point. Again, I'm just trying to get you up to speed with how MVC works. So I'm going to leave everything as a string because I don't feel like getting any entity framework errors and all that kind of stuff. Now, while I'm on that subject, let's go ahead and save this. Entity framework is basically this framework that allows you to set up data context, which the easy way to describe it is it goes out and connects to like a database and will pull pull through information. Entity Framework has all these tools like Lambda and LINQ or LINQ expressions that you can use to quickly retrieve data. You know, like things like data.add, data. Get, or that type of thing. So what I want to do right now is I want to go ahead and set up a database. Now I have a server set up that I can go in and just set up one here. And .NET does offer a file-based data, but I don't use that. I always want to set up a hard-coded database here, a hard copy or whatever you want to call it, or an instance. There we go. So I'm going to log into my database engine. I'm going to go out here and do add new database, and I am going to call this my cool app, and I referenced that just because I want to make sure I knew what the name was. So we'll go out here, my cool app database, and that's all you have to do, and you just hit OK, and now you've got a database. Now the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go out to my web config, and this default connection string is actually going to have to change at some point. So what I'm going to do for now is I'm going to leave this alone, and we're just going to use the file, and eventually I'll change that because obviously I don't need you guys trying to hack into my database. So let's close SQL and let's give this a shot. So right now I have a model, and we want to use what's called the package manager console to create the context that will allow me to retrieve and push data to that data source. But before we can do that, we need to create a controller. Now the cool thing about .NET, we have our model. I want to go out to the controllers folder, and now I want to create a controller that will handle the getting and retrieving, or retrieving and editing of all that data. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click here, do add controller, and this is where things get fun. So I'm going to look through these options here. We have MVC5 controller using Entity Framework. I mean, there are a ton of options here. I'm going to go the easy route now, and we're just going to do the basic MVC5 controller with views using Entity Framework. Later on I want to cover Web API and how that works. So I'm going to hit there, I'm going to hit add. I created a model class called customer model, so I'm going to select that. This is basically the model class that we're building this controller around, and it's going to basically scaffold or create all the functions, so you don't have to do all that unnecessary ridiculous boilerplate work. Excuse me, I can't talk today. Our data context, we're just going to select the default application DB context, and you can use this for everything. It's all a matter of preference. Some people like to create separate DB contexts for certain things, but for this we're just going to use the default one. I'm not going to do the async stuff now because I feel like that gets more advanced. That's a newer technology, and there's a lot of people that are iffy about using that, and there's things that I do and don't like about it personally. But for now, let's just not use that. We want to generate views for each one of these things, and we basically want to scaffold everything. And we've got our layout already set in that view start file, which I showed you in the other tutorial. And we're going to just let this stay as customer models controller, just so you know what it's linked to. Now what's going to happen is I'm going to click add, and we're going to get an error. So it says we need to rebuild, so let's do it. And I think the reason why that is because I created this model, and Visual Studio is saying, hey, I need to be more aware of what's going on here behind the scenes. There's probably some things that didn't happen. Just to be on the safe side, I'm going to clean, do a rebuild, go out here, add controller. We're going to do this. We're going to do customer models. We're going to pick a class for the application DB context, and we're going to hit add. And guess what? It's scaffolding. So while that is scaffolding, well, there we go. I don't even need to try to think of something to talk about. This is where .NET is so awesome, or Visual Studio at least, is it has created everything that I need to go out and list, edit, add, update, do whatever I need, even delete customers. So what we're going to do is we're going to hit build, and we are going to start without debugging, Now, one thing I want you to notice while that's loading is it went out and created a folder here called Customer Models. Typically, I wouldn't leave the word models on there. I would just call it customer, and then you have create, delete, and so on. And you know, honestly, just to keep things real, I'm going to go ahead and change that, and I'm going to show you how to do that. So we have our customer models controller here. Whenever you need to rename something, you always want to right click and do refactor rename so it hits all instances of this throughout the project. So I'm going to call it customer controller. Hit OK. It's going to look everywhere that it needs to be applied to, and we're done. Now the problem is this doesn't match this folder. So I'm going to go out here and I'm going to do rename, change that to customer, clean, rebuild, start without debugging. Now if this works correctly, I should simply be able to go out here and go to customer, and there we go. So basically what happened is, if I go back over to my controller, which we need to rename that to, let's go ahead and do that real quick. Let's call it customer controller. I'm going to walk you through this. So the index page basically initializes with the customers list. We don't have any right now because we just built this. The details view will basically look up a customer by its ID. It passes that through, goes out through entity framework and does the find, and then returns the customer model. So everything gets injected into the model. That's the beauty of MVC framework. In other languages, you typically have to set variables and do all that mess, and it's such a waste of time. On creation, we basically have the view that renders for the actual page, and then we can post back to it here with all the form information, and this is the way that we bind that data to the controllers now in MVC5. We have the edit view, same thing, we pass the ID into, and you know, just so on and so forth. Everything's pretty much the same. Delete, pass the ID, and go out and find it, delete, or whatever. Right here's where it actually does the delete. So again, .NET will create all this stuff for you. You don't even have to touch it unless you get into some fancy functionality that you need. So I want to go back over here to Google Chrome, and I'm going to create a new customer. So I'm going to do JUDSON Terrell 555-555-1212. My email address is judsonmusic@me.com. We'll do 123 Maple Street, Suite 100. That would be anywhere. Let's do South Carolina 29999, and we're going to hit create. And there we go. That easy. So now I have an entry in the database, and I can go to details. If I need to edit it, I can click here. I can go back to list. If I need to delete it, I can do that. Let's just test that out. I'll put in some bogus information here. Create. I don't like that. Are you sure you want to delete it? Delete. Boom, we're done. So basically we just created a database context. I showed you how to use the model, the view, and the controller, and you know, essentially the views get rendered to these specific folders, which you see here in customer, create, delete, edit, and that's basically what I showed you. So that's part 3, and I'll be working on part 4 here shortly, and we'll get on to some more advanced customization, validation, things like that. Thanks for watching.